This meeting is being recorded.
So thank you all for coming. I want to introduce you DanielRoth. Daniel and I have been working together for like over 10 years. And anytime Daniel has worked on a project, anytime, and he's given it the thumbs up, I've gotten agents for it. So I help people get the book deals, but he's the guy who bought the books. He was with Simon and Schuster as a publisher and longtime editor for years. He was with HarperCollins. He's won major awards. What was that African American Academy Award, Daniel? Did I have that right?
Yeah, Academy Award for Best Documentary.
Yeah, I mean, he's just amazing at what he does. And I'm very happy to introduce him. And let's see, I have more people coming in. That's great. If you can hold your questions to the end, take plenty of notes. So Daniel wants to stay in his flow while he's presenting, but there'll be plenty of time for questions as well. So I think we can get started, Daniel. So you're talking about what makes a great story. Go for it.
You know, one of the I don't know, I'm assuming that everybody on this call is at some stage of being a writer. Either a new writer, an experienced writer. And so a lot of what I have to say, you may already know, you may not. I have no way of knowing what people know. I don't know. I know some of you, I don't know many of you. But the real question that we are all trying to answer, and I put this thought out, is what makes a great story? That's the fundamental question that's really on the table. And I'm sure that everyone on this call has given that some thought. I reduced it because I tend to be reductive, which is a good thing in my opinion, to two words: conflict and resolution. To me, that's what makes a good story. One of the critical pieces, and it's, again, I've been reading now, I'm in both professionally and personally, I've read thousands of books and thousands of movie scripts and have every intention to continue. But the three-act structure that I mentioned in the page that Randy sent out is really critical, in my opinion. Now, I realize not every book is the same, and I realize not everybody's got the same story to tell. And I'm not an absolutist, but I would tell you that the fundamental three-act structure is critical to understand. Whether or not you agree with it or you go with it, at least you need to understand. And according to my research, this comes from Aristotle's Poetics, and the basic structure that he laid out, and these were the words that I understand the translation of, that 25% is setup, and then 50% is the confrontation, and then 25%, final 25% is the resolution. There's a guy who, I don't remember his name, I'm sorry, but in the movie business, he put it a little bit differently. He said, first you got to get him up the tree, then you got to shake the tree, then you got to get them down the tree. So it's essentially the same premise. And through that three-act structure, one of the things that's very important is the character arc. Where does the character start, and where does he or she wind up at the end? So you've got this three-act structure, and I if anybody wants to know more about it, just Google Aristotle three-act structure, and you can read more about it. But it really is fundamental to storytelling, and I personally accept that. I don't find that to be a controversial statement. What's the challenge in all of this is how much information is relevant, and how much and when does it get injected into the storyline? For most of the people on the call might remember what driving a stick shift car is, but there's a delicate balance between a clutch and a brake and the accelerator, and you've got a delicate balance in how much information do you reveal and when do you reveal it. And that's a very challenging question. You know, we as writers, whether we realize it or not, we take on a very serious commitment to our reader. And I've never heard anybody really talk about this. That doesn't mean they haven't, but the relationship between you, the writer, and the reader is a profound one. It's a very personal one. You, the writer, are asking the reader for his or her time, his or her money, his or her energy, and in the best case scenario, hoping that they will come back for your next book. So there's an intimacy that exists between the writer and the reader that is really profound, because what will make a reader stop reading? I mean, we've all walked out, I'm sure, of a movie when it's just too stupid, and you feel, I'll speak for myself, I feel offended that the director thinks that I'm that stupid that I'm going to sit here. This brings me to this notion that I wrote down about the suspension of disbelief. And the words, if you stop to think about them, are pretty self-explanatory, but they're critical to storytelling. And again, it's not all black and white. Everybody knows that Superman can't fly. We have agreed to accept, to disbelieve. We have entered into an agreement. Okay, he can't fly, but I'm going to believe it anyway because I choose to go along with the story. Now, what goes into that acceptance of disbelief is complicated. It's not something I can explain. I don't really understand it, and it's different in every situation. But the suspension of disbelief is critical to a story. You're asking people to come with you for a ride of some sort, and you, the writer, are always establishing your credibility. It's a critical piece of the story. And again, this is where, and based on my understanding, I look in all the books that I read now, I look at the acknowledgement page, and it's wonderful to see that all of you, the writers, you have many people that you acknowledge as part of, this is my word, the team that in essence gives birth to a book. It's kind of the picture I have in my mind is of a bunch of doctors and nurses and medical professionals standing around, but there's only one mother who delivers the book. But all these other people are part of the process, and that's where you get to test your credibility. That's where you get to test your suspension of disbelief. Will my audience accept this? Will they just blow it off and say, this is just ridiculous? So these are all areas that really need to be attended to when you're working on your book. I think these are all, I would say, I don't necessarily mean this literally, but it's like a checklist of things to be mindful of. Randy, what else is on the list that I don't have in front of me?
Kierkegaard, Act of Faith,
Oh,
for the writer.
okay. Yes. So I'm going to just say something that I'm sure you're all familiar with, that the Danish philosopher Soren Kierkegaard called it an act of faith. And no matter what, writing a book or a movie script or really anything, any creation of any type of art is an act of faith. And there's just no getting around it. There are no guarantees. That's why I call this the fickle gods of publishing. You take your best shot. There's no guarantees. A lot of it is serendipity. A lot of it is good writing. A lot of it is knowing the right people. It's life, but it is an act of faith. I spent 7 years, not every day, working with a co-writer on a movie script, and we haven't been able to sell it yet. And that's the nature of the business, and you have to know that going in. You need to be realistic about it, and you need to be able to get the help that you need. Writing groups, I'm sure many of you are involved in writing groups of one sort or another, and they're great. I mean, they provide really they're the voice of they should be the voice of the reader, not the voice of the writer. You're the writer, but they should be surrogates for the readers. If things don't make sense to your reading group, then you probably need to take another look at it. Another thing I wanted to talk about was character development, and dialogue, because I've been reading a lot of fiction lately, where the dialogue, there's three levels of dialogue, if you will. There's one that you say out loud. There's one that you think, well, we'll just say two. There's also the written word, but people don't speak the way they think. And a lot of the dialogue that I have been reading is really the manifestation of an inner dialogue. And it's just your thoughts are not the same. They don't manifest themselves the same way that your words do. It's just, they're two different, I don't know, brain centers. I don't really know what to call it. And one of the things that I think is valuable if you're writing dialogue, read it out loud. Read it out loud. Have it read out loud to you. Or if nothing else, record it. Because another common problem that I've noticed is that writers tend to write the dialogue as if it was one voice, and it's not. People speak differently. People have different cadences. People have idiosyncrasies, and the more that you can honor that, the better your dialogue will be. And that's why I suggest that you try to get your dialogue out of your head and out loud. I mean, dialogue is, by definition, is words that we speak to one another. They're not thoughts, they're words. I also put down in my list about protagonists and antagonists, and I think everybody's pretty clear about that. The one thing that I do want to say is that you need to create a worthy adversary. People tend to, well, I shouldn't say that. You need to have that's what goes back full circle to the issue of conflict and resolution. There's got to be a conflict. There's got to be some reason why the reader keeps going. I generally give a book 50 to 100 pages. If I'm not in it by then, I'm not going to keep reading it. I have a lot of books that I want to read, and I'm just not going to waste my time. And I'm sure that that's true of other people as well. So, the Holy Grail is how do I keep people reading? How do I keep people turning the page? Because that's the most fundamental act that we're asking our audience to do. Stick with me. I'm going to tell you a story. It's a good story. It'll be worth your while. Don't give up. And that's the message that we want to convey. We as writers, we always want to convey. Don't be afraid of creating a worthy adversary. Don't be, make it strong. Be willing to dig down deep. Another thing I asked made in my own personal notes was, are you writing in Technicolor or are you writing in black and white? Now, for those of you who aren't old enough to understand black and white television, there's nothing I can do about that. But some of us are old enough to remember black and white television, and it was pretty boring. And language can also be boring. It can be monotone. You need to be you need to be willing to splash it up. You need to be willing to liven it up. I read a book recently for Randy, and I don't remember the setup isn't important, but the line was, and I shot her, or words to that effect. And I thought, whoa, is that all? Is that it? I mean, that's it? I mean, is that all that happened? You shot her? Was it loud? Did you kill her? Was there blood? I mean, I asked a million questions because you can't just drop that in a reader's lap and expect them to keep going. You are constantly engaging with the reader. And if you don't take anything else away from today, and I hope you do, but remember, you have a relationship with every person that picks up your book. And they have an expectation of you. They want you to entertain them. They want something. They want you to illuminate, enlighten, whatever it is that they want. They want something from you. And you need to be in a position to say to yourself, what do they want, and am I giving it to them? And I think those are really critical points. You're not writing for yourself. You're writing, and again, this is from a commercial point of view. I'm not a person to make a distinction between what is called literary fiction and popular fiction. I'm sure there are plenty of people who can lecture ad nauseum about that. I am not one of them. I just like a good book. I will tell you one. I'll give you one example though. There's a British writer named his real name is John Banville, and he's won a Booker Prize. And I've read quite a few of his books. It's for some reason, I don't know why, he created an alter ego writer by the name of Benjamin Black. Same person, no secret, for whatever reason. And I thought, well, how peculiar that this is a guy who he's a really well-known writer. Why? What's the difference? And when his last book I was reading, I started at about page 64. This was a John Banville book. I started at about page 64, and I started marking and wound up with about 28, I think it was 28 words that I didn't know. Now, I have a pretty good vocabulary. It's not epic, but 28 words in one book is a lot of words that I subsequently looked up. Then I went to the Benjamin Black book, which is his down market, his slightly less, and interestingly enough, there was not a single word in the book that I didn't know. So draw what conclusions that you will from that. You want to engage the reader. You want the reader to come back for more. You want to give them something. You want to whet their appetites. And as I said, God willing, they'll come back for your next book. Did I leave anything out, Randy? I don't
Can you
know.
talk about the information transfer points? What is that?
Yeah, yeah. Okay, I just made that up. I needed there was one point. So the terminology that Randy has referred to are information transfer points and emotion transfer points. And again, I just made those terms up, but they're pretty self-explanatory. And again, one of the books I recently read for Randy, I think in the computer language, it's like a download where you just dump all the information at one point. You can't do that. You can't do that in a book. You've got one of the great skills and difficulty is how much do I want to tell my audience, and when do I want to tell them? When it's like peeling the layers back of an onion. You are in charge. When do you want to reveal certain pieces of information? How much do you want to give them? When do you want to give them that? And that's why that the 3-act structure is helpful, at least for me, to visualize when there are certain key points that, and whether they're emotions or information, how you transmit that information and when you transmit that information is critically important, because you can't just what you cannot do is take a glass and just pour it on the table. You can't just do it all at once. It may make your life a little bit easier, but you've ruined the music, the suspense. As I said, coming full circle, to me, what makes a good story is conflict and resolution. And if you water down the conflict all at once, well, you don't really have any place to go. So I would suggest that and I realize every writer is different and every writer has his or her own process. And I have, whatever works for you is the best thing that you should do. But there are points in a story where they're turning points, for lack of a better phrase. And where in the curve do you want those turning points to take place? That would be one specific suggestion that I would make.
Well, I think you've covered everything on the list. If you'd like to ask, we can open up for questions now, Daniel?
Sure.
Very good.
I'll do my best.
Okay, so either raise your hand if you have a specific question, or use the Zoom hand in reactions below. Okay, Elaine, can you unmute yourself?
Hello. Hi, Daniel.
Hello,
I'm
Elaine.
Stevens. I'm in Biloxi, Mississippi. Did you talk about emotional transfer points? Did you?
Yeah, again, it's the same principle. How much do you want to reveal, and when do you want to reveal it? I have a great affection for Mississippi. I've spent a lot of time in Clarksdale, Mississippi, a lot of time. And anyway, I just want to acknowledge, shout out to Mississippi. Emotional, it's really about how much and when do you want to reveal what it's like throwing a rock in a pond. You have there are ripples that are a natural result of that action. So every time you throw an emotional rock into the narrative, there's a ripple effect that takes place, and you want to be able to think that through, because you don't want to give away the ending too soon to make it simple. So you want to take these. They're like little nuggets. They're like gold nuggets that you want to place them along the trail. You don't want them all at once. And whether it's information or whether it's emotion, whatever it is, it needs to be handled judiciously and not in one fell swoop.
And that applies to memoir as well, is what
I'm sorry?
Memoir. It applies to memoir, even though the story may be known to many, that you still release that delicately, or as you said, like the ripples in the water. You just emotionally, you wouldn't reveal all the emotions at once.
Yeah, and you have to, and it's the difficulty is in knowing what do you reveal, and when do you reveal it, and how do you reveal it. Those are all factors that go into the creation of a manuscript.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Gloria,
Sorry, anyone else?
Hi, thank you so much for this Zoom meeting. It's wonderful information.
Hello,
I'm
Gloria. Nice to meet you.
Gloria Galloway from Sacramento, California. My question is about prologues. I've read articles where it says, do not under any circumstances do a prologue. Editors hate them. And then I've read others that say, make it short, to the point. What are your thoughts about prologues?
Well, I don't have strong feelings about it either way. However, the question that I would ask first is, what's the purpose of the prologue?
Mhm.
Why, as a writer, why do I feel a need to write a prologue? Is there something in the prologue that I'm compensating for that's not in my manuscript? And again, I'm asking, I don't know the answer to the question, but what's the purpose of the prologue, and what problem, if that's the right word, or what situation will the prologue address that the manuscript does not address? As far as like some do and some don't, I tend to ignore all that stuff. I mean, you're the boss and you write your book,
Right.
and no, really, I mean, because everybody's going to tell you this. I've been doing this for a long time now, and I make no decisions. Zero. I tell that to every writer that I work with, that I will read your work, I will make suggestions, I will ask questions, I will make observations, but I will make no decisions. And so if you want to write a prologue, write a prologue. Just ask yourself, why? I mean, that's a fair question. Why do I feel a need to write a prologue? Is something missing in my book that should be there, and I'm compensating? Oh, I don't know. I've never written a prologue, so I read them all the time, but to be perfectly honest, I often skip them because I want to read the book. I didn't buy the prologue. I bought the book. So I think you should take the freedom to do as you see fit, is my answer.
Okay, thank you.
Does that help?
Yes.
questions, people? Any other questions? It's a great opportunity to ask the man who bought the books. I'd like to, Tony, did you have a question? Turn on your, unmute yourself there, Tony. You're still muted, Tony. Well, any other questions? Okay, Elaine.
I'm ready when you
I
are.
could ask a million.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Tony.
That's okay. I had to flip through the pictures to get to mine and unmute myself. Everyone. Hey, Daniel. My question is, as you know, I've started a historical fiction book based on real events and embellished circumstances with what if kind of tales. And in the first book, I took a fair amount of time to develop the characters. And as that book has been reviewed by a number of critics and a range of publishers to production adaptation professionals, they're all telling me that they want to pull a fair amount of the origin of those characters out and put it into kind of a promotional prequel. And I'm wondering, have you discovered a pattern when a writer wants to develop a series around a particular cast of characters that could go on for multiple books? Is there a way to measure that balance between page turner, gritty impact, that grab you, hold you kind of ride, versus taking that moment to give a little more background, a little more origin and depth to the characters?
Well, the short answer to your question is no. There's no formula. And it, so much of it depends upon where you want to go. Remember that you as a writer have the freedom at any point to insert flashbacks if you need to at a later date in your narrative. In other words, if you don't do it in the first book, you can still include flashbacks at a later date. There's no right or wrong balance. If you remember, because Tony and I have worked before, we took out quite a bit of the first pages on that, based on that. So you're going to get different opinions from different people, and there's no one way. And I say this to everybody, there's no one way to do this. You've got to use your instincts. That is this relevant information? Will it become relevant in another book? Will it become relevant in another 100 pages? And that's an internal process. That's often an instinctive and internal process that only the writer can really answer that question. And how much is too much? Well, that's what editors are for, really.
Well, I want to thank you for your help on my first book. It has done well over the last year. And my second book, I'm going to be sending over to you very soon. And I want to let you know that people that are reading my current writing, is I'm only into my second book, so I'm still learning. But it's the dialogue that you helped me learn, Daniel. If you could share a little bit of background on that. My second book, I'm told, and these are about 120,000 word novels, historical fiction. It's about 80-20 dialogue right now. And it really flies, according to some of the early editing type of critique readers. And I want to thank you for that, because of all the things that you taught me so far with regard to 3-act structure, how to do a character build and a character arc, and who's an enemy, who's an ally, and really sorting that out and making the story readable and more economical to the reader, so they can really enjoy it. You've also done a great job of teaching me, anyway, I feel, dialogue. So,
again, different books I've read books that are largely dialogue. James Ellroy, a very well-known present-day writer, his books are largely dialogue. And as I said, everybody is different. Everybody has a different style. And part of growing as a writer is developing your own style. The dialogue, the advice that we talked about way back when, again, this goes back to what I said earlier, that the dialogue that you write in your brain is not the same as the dialogue that you speak. It's just, we live in our brains, but we occupy a different universe when we speak to our next door neighbor or to our husband or wife or best friend or whatever. We don't use the same words. So I just think it's really important that the dialogue that is being written needs to be listened to out loud. whether that's done, whether you read it yourself or whether you have someone else read it to you, or worst comes to worst, you record it and listen to it. It needs to be listened to, not just read. And that's one piece of advice that I would give every writer, that dialogue is it's really the internet of life, if you will. It's what connects us all. Our language is what has connected us all long before writing, for millennia. And we talk differently than we think. So try that to me. And the other advice I remember us talking about it was, don't be afraid to dig deep. Don't be afraid to root around in the darkness, because that's part of the human experience. And I think that goes to the heart of good writing. People, again, there are all different kinds of books and different levels of insight and introspection. But I think people, there's all kinds of people. Many people want something real. They want it to resonate. And that goes back to the issue of the suspension of disbelief. How do you tell a fantastic story, and maybe it's believable and maybe it's not believable, and maybe it's believable to some people and not to others? There's no one way to do it. And I've heard it said, and I agree for obvious reasons, that every writer, when they are ready, will find their editor. And I believe that that's true. And I think that analogy of, the writer is the mom, but there's a lot of doctors and nurses and medical people standing around helping. And some help more than others. And I've certainly been in writers groups where they tend to be competitive and not so helpful. But people are different, and it depends. Did I answer your question, Tony?
Yes. Keep making it from the heart and keep it genuine, and let it translate.
Yeah. And listen to it.
Right.
Listen to the dialogue. And is this how people speak? And remember, not everyone speaks the same, too. That's another common problem that writers make. They go into that dialogue in their brain, and then everybody tends to sound the same. And that's just not real. People have speech, they have their own idiosyncrasies, and you need to find them in your characters.
Very good.
Well, that's an incredible point. I started thinking about the characters I'm writing, going, do they all sound the same? Elaine, would you like to follow up with your question? Thank you, Tony.
So I noticed on the email that Randy sent out, you focus mostly on fiction, but I'm writing memoir, which has been referred to as creative nonfiction. So do you have any commentary on that at all, as far as how to woo a publisher? And of course, Randy's a genius when it comes to book proposals. I purchased hers, and it's an in-depth look at, I feel like I need to give blood in order to complete it, though. I mean, it's really in detail. I'm quite afraid of that book proposal.
You may. I can't speak specifically to memoirs. It's not something that I'm not drawn to memoirs as a reader, but I will tell you that everybody's life is in many years ago, a long time ago, I hitchhiked across the country. People don't do that anymore, but I did that. And I realized that every car I got in, everybody has a story to tell. And that was how I approached my hitchhiking experience. Everybody has a story. And the way to engage the driver is to try to hear their story, because everybody wants to talk and everybody wants to tell their story. I've had a couple of people approach me about memoirs. I'd be happy to work on one. But ultimately, what about, and this is not directed to you, what about the memoir writer's life is going to be interesting to me? And I don't know, I mean, obviously we've never met, so I have no idea what the answer to that is. But writing what makes a memoir sellable?
Mhm.
And I don't know the answer to that, other than to say, well, two things. The person has to have a story to tell that's going to be of interest to someone other than, friends and family,
Mhm.
and that they have an ability to tell the story, that their writing ability resonates with the reader. And aside from that, it goes back to Kierkegaard and the act of faith. You just never know. You just never, ever know. You don't know what's gonna. You just don't know what's gonna happen. You commit to a project, and you just go for it. And then at some point, the fickle gods of publishing will come in, or they won't. But there's no way to know.
Thank
I
you.
hope that's
That's an honest response. I appreciate that. I think you have to have faith when you do a memoir, and you have to take maybe Valium and some Prozac and some other things. You end up really exploring a lot of darkness in your life, and
yeah.
it's
You have
a
to be.
courageous endeavor. I have to even give myself credit for that. So.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a courageous endeavor, and whether or not it's commercially viable, that's where the fickle gods of publishing come in. Because
Well, and that's where the art of the writer comes in. If that person believes in it, I think, and I've believed in it for so long, and I've finished the draft and in editing right now, but I've been approached several times. So thank you. I hope we meet again. Perhaps you'll take this on.
easy to find.
Well, let me tell you how easy it is to find Daniel. So I'm going to send everybody on the call just one-page email, and it's if you'd like to work with Daniel, this is the way to do it. Daniel will start with a read-through of your manuscript. I will send everybody a confidentiality agreement before you send anything. And price is simply based on word count, which will be in the letter you receive. So depending on the size of your book, the analysis, which is the first step, is he's going to read the entire thing and spend half an hour on a phone call with you to talk with you about it. So it's that simple. And if you want to follow through, you're welcome to. Is that about right, Daniel?
Yeah, and yes, that's absolutely right. Just to clarify, that's what, simply put, that's stage one. There's no obligation whatsoever beyond stage one. Often, not always, but often as a result of the feedback in the movie business, it's called coverage. I don't know what we call it. What do we call it, Randy? Coverage? Do we still call it?
Analysis, read through an
I
analysis.
call it coverage because I used to be a script analyst. And so I read your manuscript. I do my best to be, first of all, I am honest to a fault sometimes, but that's life. But I always will try to find suggestions, make suggestions that you are free to ignore or accept, and as Randy said, I invite a phone call afterwards. We spend a half an hour on the phone. You're free to ask me anything you want. And based on my coverage and conversations, sometimes, maybe 50% of the time, people will do a rewrite based on our conversation, based on the feedback, and then resubmit for a second time. Now, in one instance, I spent it's not a line by line analysis. This is not copy editing. This is what's called developmental editing. I'm prepared to do copy editing, but that would be the third step. And again, there's no obligation. You stop anytime you want, but that's how it begins. And if possible, I always prefer to get the documents in Word as opposed to a PDF, because I can't help myself. If I see a misspelling, I change it. I mean, even though that's not what I'm supposed to do, it's too frustrating to me to read a PDF and find mistakes and not be able to address them. I don't like that. I don't want to send back mistakes if I have the ability to change them. No
Can I
extra charge.
give you a compliment?
Sure.
When I went through this process, it was my first book, and I had about 137,000 words, of which roughly 37,000 words got cut through this very process. And it restructured the book and made it publishable and saleable. And it's still selling bits and by pieces a year later, to a point where there's more interest than I ever dreamt of going to a second book. So I want to thank you for that process, because I think that's allowing that process to occur and send the Word doc in. It not only makes those fine point gestures of corrections, but the thematic of what you're trying to do. I think Daniel's just an A++ at getting that out of at least first-time writers like myself, that I can vouch for, understanding the process and then getting it out of your insides and onto the paper. And I want to tell you,
I appreciate that. As I said earlier, I love what I do, and I have an unshakable commitment to every writer that I work with. My North Star is, how can I help make this manuscript commercially viable? That's it. Again, the Fickle Gods of Publishing are, we bow to them. So all of us bow to the Fickle Gods of Publishing. We are at their mercy. There's nothing we can do about that, but the only thing we can do is to do our best. And my commitment is unshakable to every person that Randy sends my way, to do my best to help you, the writer, do your best. And that's it. And I hope to continue doing this as long as humanly possible.
Well, thank you, Daniel. I think that's a perfect way to wrap up this talk. I appreciate everybody who came, and I hope you got a lot out of it. I know I did. I was taking notes.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate it. And as I said, I'm easy to find. Everything goes through Randy, and I'm always around.
So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.